Welcome to the Stoic Tide. We spend so much of our lives trying to make the world fit us, trying to correct people, trying to explain ourselves, trying to get others to behave how we believe they should. We chase peace through control, failing to realize that control is the very thing keeping peace away. The more we grip, the more life slips through our fingers, and that's where this quiet, powerful idea steps in like a whisper. Let them misunderstand you. Let them misjudge you. Let them choose things you don't agree with. Let them fail. Let them walk away. Let them think they're right. Let them be loud, careless, or distant. Let them say nothing. Let them say too much. Let them be who they are while you remain who you are. This simple phrase, let them, is not weakness. It's mastery. It's not apathy. It's clarity. Because trying to control people, how they think, how they speak, how they respond, drains your soul. You wake up already tired, already on defense, already rehearsing conversations that might never happen. And in doing so, you give your energy to everyone except yourself. You live your life in response to their choices instead of in alignment with your own values. The Stoics understood this long ago. They taught that peace doesn't come from controlling the world, but from mastering your response to it. Some things are in our control and some are not. Epictetus said most people nod at that line and move on. But those who live it, truly live it, become untouchable, not cold, not indifferent, just clear. Unshaken by noise, focused on what matters, detached from what doesn't. The let them theory is a mindset shift. It teaches you to stop carrying what was never yours to begin with. Other people's opinions, let them. Their expectations, let them. Their resistance to your growth, let them. Because the moment you start chasing peace in them, you've already abandoned peace in you. This doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you let disrespect slide or tolerate mistreatment. We'll talk about that later. But it does mean that you stop confusing your job. Your job is not to change people. Your job is to observe, to discern, to choose, and to walk away if necessary without making a scene, and without needing to be right. When you stop engaging in battles that don't serve you, you reclaim energy you didn't even realize you were losing. Mental space, emotional clarity, creative power. You stop rewriting reality and start accepting it, not because you approve, but because you've decided to direct your energy toward becoming. Not convincing. Think about how many times peace has been within reach. But you gave it up because you just couldn't let them. Let them go. Let them change. Let them stay stuck. Let them talk. Let them walk away. Let them shine or fall or disappear. Let them reveal who they are while you focus on who you're becoming. That's what this episode is about. A practice, a mindset, a theory grounded in ancient wisdom and made urgent by modern chaos. Let them is not a rule for the world. It's a rule for your soul, a way of moving through life with less resistance and more clarity, less noise, more truth. And today we'll break it down. 10 reflections, 10 ways to bring this theory into your daily life, not as a concept to admire, but as a discipline to live. Because the most peaceful people in the world are not the ones who've avoided conflict. They're the ones who've stopped trying to control what was never theirs. So take a breath, let go of who you need them to be, and let this be the moment you choose peace over power, clarity over control, and evolution over ego. Let's begin. Let them be who they are. There's something liberating, almost spiritual, about allowing people to reveal themselves without interruption, no correction, no persuasion, no attempt to rewrite them into the version we wish they were. Just a quiet, calm observation of who they choose to be when no one is managing their behavior. This is where the let them mindset begins, not with judgment, not with silence loaded with resentment, but with genuine detachment. The kind that stems from understanding one simple truth. People are who they are, and your peace does not depend on them changing. But that's not how most of us live. We try to edit people. We try to fix, guide, persuade, correct, coach, argue, hint, manipulate, all in the name of connection or loyalty or love. And in doing so, we forget that true clarity comes not from who we want people to be, but from watching who they become when we stop trying to control them. Letting people be who they are doesn't mean you approve of everything they do. It means you're done wasting time trying to mold them into someone they have no interest in becoming. It means stepping back not in anger but in awareness. Because the more you try to change someone, the more they'll resist you or perform for you or resent you. But either way, you'll never truly know them. You'll only know the version they give you in response to your pressure. And that's dangerous because it creates false connection. You believe you've changed them, guided them, helped them. But what you've really done is created a performance, a fragile harmony. One that will collapse the moment you stop holding it up. The Stoics would call this a failure of wisdom because it reveals a misunderstanding of control, mistaking influence for power and change for growth. The wise path is different. The wise path says, let them talk, let them act, let them reveal themselves. Because once they do, you can finally make a clear decision, not based on potential or fantasy, but based on truth. Letting people be who they are also protects you from self-deception. How many times have you ignored red flags because you thought you could change someone? How many times have you poured energy into potential rather than presence? How often have you seen what you wanted to see and suffered for it? That suffering is not noble. It's not love. It's attachment mixed with illusion. And nothing destroys peace faster. But when you adopt the let them mindset, you begin to notice things more clearly. You watch how people speak to others when they're not trying to impress you. You observe how they handle stress, disappointment, success. You don't react, you reflect, you don't project, you perceive. And that perception becomes power. Not power over them, but power within you. The power to choose who you allow in, who you invest in, who deserves access to your energy. You also stop chasing compatibility. You realize that if someone requires your constant effort to remain close, they're not really close. They're being carried. And while love, friendship, and connection all require work, they should never require you to abandon yourself just to keep the other person comfortable. Letting people be who they are also means giving them the space to fail, to lie, to disrespect, to reveal their true values. And instead of reacting with rage or heartbreak, you respond with clarity. Thank you for showing me. Now I know that response doesn't come from weakness. It comes from sovereignty, from knowing your standards so deeply that you don't need to scream them at others. You just walk away when they're violated. This mindset also sets you free from the exhausting cycle of over-explaining. If you feel misunderstood, let them. If they misinterpret your silence, let them. If they think your distance is arrogance, let them. Because your job is not to convince people of your worth. Your job is to live it. And those meant for your life will see it. The rest, let them fall away. It's not easy, especially when you care, especially when you see the potential in someone. But wisdom means letting go of what someone could be and making decisions based on who they are. That's not cynicism. That's clarity. So ask yourself, who in your life are you still trying to shape, fix, or save? What would happen if you just stopped, not with bitterness, but with peace? With the quiet knowing that when you let people be who they are, you finally make space for who you are meant to become. Let them show you, then decide. Detachment brings peace. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying what was never yours to hold. The thoughts of others, their choices, their mistakes, their moods, their silence, their reactions. We try to solve people, fix situations, hold everything together, and then wonder why we're burnt out, anxious, angry, or resentful. The truth is, peace does not come from control. It comes from detachment. But let's make something clear. Detachment is not indifference. It's not coldness. It's not shutting down emotionally or becoming numb to the world. Detachment is the conscious decision to release what you cannot control and to reclaim what you can. Your thoughts, your actions, your energy. It is a practice, a discipline, a way of moving through life with open hands instead of clenched fists. The Stoics were masters of this. They taught that serenity comes when you align your concern only with what is within your power. And they were right. Because the moment you let go of the illusion that you can fix everyone, please everyone, or protect everyone, you exhale, your nervous system calms, your mind clears, your heart opens. When you're attached to everything, everything can hurt you. Every word feels personal. Every delay feels like rejection. Every disagreement becomes a threat. But when you practice detachment, you see things for what they are, not what your fear says they are. Someone doesn't respond to your message. It's not proof that you're unworthy. It's just silence. Someone criticizes you unfairly. It's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their perception. Detachment helps you create space between the trigger and the story you tell yourself about it. And that space, that sacred space, is where peace lives. When you detach, you stop being a puppet. You're no longer yanked around by every shift in other people's behavior. You stop trying to guess what they're thinking. You stop managing their emotions. You stop reacting to every change in tone, every delayed reply, every subtle shift, because you've learned to stay rooted in your own center. And that center, it's built on clarity, not chaos. Detachment also gives you back your power. When you're overly involved in everyone else's experience, you lose access to your own. You forget your own needs. You ignore your own intuition. You dilute your own focus. But when you pull your energy back, you begin to feel again, think clearly again, move intentionally again. And that shift creates momentum. The kind that actually changes your life, not just your mood. But here's the thing. Detachment feels unnatural at first, especially if you've been taught to overgive, to over-explain, to overinvest, especially if you found your worth in being needed. It will feel like you're being distant, like you're doing something wrong, like you're being selfish. But that's just the old program resisting the new standard. Because detachment is not withdrawal, it's elevation. It's choosing not to drown in the emotions of others just to prove that you care. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them feel their own consequences, to let them figure it out, to let them sit with their choices even if it's uncomfortable to watch. This is where maturity meets compassion, where love meets wisdom. You can still care, you can still support, but not at the cost of your own mental stability. Detachment is also essential in healing. If you're trying to move forward while staying energetically entangled with the people or patterns that broke you, you'll remain stuck. Detachment allows you to honor the past without being enslaved by it, to remember without reliving, to learn without looping. And from that place you begin to reclaim your peace, not as a temporary relief but as a permanent residence. So how do you practice it? You pause. You breathe. You notice your urge to react and you choose reflection instead. You ask, is this mine to fix? Is this mine to hold? Is this mine to carry? If not, let it go. Let it pass. Let it burn itself out. Not because you don't care, but because you finally learned that peace is a responsibility and no one can protect it but you. So ask yourself, where in your life have you been gripping too tightly? Who have you been trying to manage, correct, rescue, or hold together? And what would your day feel like if you simply let go? Because real peace doesn't require the world to change. It only requires you to stop trying to change it. Control comes from anxiety. Control doesn't feel like fear at first. It feels like order, like logic, like responsibility. You tell yourself you're just trying to help, trying to guide, trying to prevent mistakes. But underneath that polished surface, there's something else. A tension in your chest, a mental checklist that never ends, an inner voice that whispers, if I don't manage this, everything will fall apart. That voice is anxiety. It's subtle. It dresses itself up as love, as protection, as duty. But at its core, the need to control isn't about others. It's about your discomfort with uncertainty. You fear what might happen if people make their own choices. If they walk away, if they disappoint you, if they don't follow the script you've written for them in your head. And so you tighten your grip, not because you're strong, but because you're scared. The Stoics had no illusions about control. They understood with brutal clarity that most of what happens in life is outside our power. What others say, do, or feel, that's their domain. The weather, the economy, the past, the future, the opinions of strangers. None of it belongs to you. Epictetus said, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. But for many of us, that surrender feels dangerous. It feels like giving up control means giving up safety. And that belief is what chains us to anxiety. The need to control is rarely about the other person. It's about managing the story in your head. You think, if I can get them to change, I'll finally feel okay. If I can prevent this mistake, I'll finally relax. If I can force them to understand, I'll feel seen. But peace built on control is fragile. It cracks the moment anything or anyone steps out of line. True peace is built on acceptance, not resignation, but realism. A deep knowing that you are not the director of everyone's life. Control also creates a false sense of responsibility. You start carrying burdens that don't belong to you. You think if someone is struggling, it's your job to fix it. If someone's mad, it must be something you did. If someone makes a poor choice, it reflects on you. But that's not care. That's codependency. And it drains you. Not because people are broken, but because you're trying to be the glue holding everything together. But what if you dropped the glue? What if you allowed people to fall not because you don't love them, but because you finally realize they need to stand on their own? What if you stopped playing the role of emotional manager and started focusing on your own alignment? This shift doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sovereign. You begin to separate your worth from others' behavior. You stop taking everything personally. You start focusing on what's in your control. Your thoughts, your habits, your reactions, your choices. And from that center, you move through the world with less tension, less fear, less exhaustion, because you're no longer wasting energy trying to bend reality to your will. You also begin to trust more, not blindly but wisely. You trust that other people have their own lessons to learn, that they'll grow or not on their own timeline, that your silence can speak just as loudly as your words, that walking away is sometimes more powerful than holding on. You learn to trust life, not because it's perfect, but because your peace no longer depends on it being predictable. And here's what's most freeing. When you stop trying to control others, you create space for them to be real. And in that space, they'll either rise or reveal. Either way, you gain truth. And from truth, you make better decisions, not emotional ones, clear ones. So ask yourself, where in your life are you confusing control with care? What are you trying to fix, force, or manage? Not because it's your job, but because you're afraid. And what would happen if you trusted the process just long enough to let go? Because behind every controlling habit is an anxious heart, and behind every peaceful mind is the courage to release. Let people fail and learn. We live in a world that worships comfort. We rush to make things easier, faster, smoother, not just for ourselves, but for the people we care about. And while that might feel like compassion on the surface, it often robs people of the very thing they need most: the chance to fail, the chance to struggle, the chance to learn through experience. Letting people fail isn't cruelty. It's wisdom. It's restraint. It's the strength to step back and allow someone to meet the edge of their own decisions. Because no matter how clearly you explain, how lovingly you warn, or how desperately you try to help, there are lessons that only pain can teach. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is nothing. But this is hard, especially if you're someone who feels deeply. You see someone heading toward a mistake and everything in you wants to interfere, to fix it, to rescue, to say, don't do that. I've been there. I know how this ends. And maybe you do know. Maybe you're right. But the truth is, knowledge without experience often doesn't stick. People rarely change because of what you say. They change because of what they feel, because they touched the stove, because they lost something they didn't realize they were taking for granted, because they had to sit in the silence they created. The Stoics understood this deeply. They taught that suffering wasn't the enemy. It was the crucible of transformation. Seneca said, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. We don't grow from comfort. We grow from contact with reality. And reality doesn't soften itself for the sake of your emotional protection. It teaches by exposing you to the truth. Letting people fail is honoring that process. It also honors boundaries, because when you're always rescuing, you're always involved. And when you're always involved, you're always entangled in someone else's journey. You take on guilt that isn't yours. You shoulder burdens that were never meant for you. You get caught in emotional cycles where you're the fixer and they're the one who needs fixing. That imbalance slowly poisons the relationship. You begin to resent them. They begin to rely on you in unhealthy ways. And eventually neither of you grows. But when you let go, when you allow space, something shifts. You stop trying to protect people from their own lessons. You stop trying to play the role of hero or martyr. You simply allow. Not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that care without space becomes control. This is especially true in relationships, with family, with partners, with friends. We think love means prevention, that if we care enough, we won't let the people we love suffer. But that's not love. That's fear. Fear that their failure reflects on us. Fear that their suffering will make us uncomfortable. Fear that if they hurt, we'll hurt too. And we don't want to face that pain. But pain is part of the process, and avoiding it just postpones the growth that could have been. Letting people fail also requires trust. Not blind trust in them, but trust in life. Trust that even if things fall apart, they'll land somewhere better. Trust that the discomfort will become clarity, that the mistake will become memory, that what looks like a setback is really a setup for strength. When you let people face the full weight of their choices, you give them a chance to stand up on their own legs for the first time. And what if they don't? What if they fall harder than you expected? What if they don't recover quickly or at all? Even then, their journey is still theirs, and your job is not to interrupt it, but to respect it, to support when asked, not to control when uninvited. So ask yourself, who are you trying to save right now? Who are you protecting from pain? Not because they need protection, but because you fear their discomfort. And what would happen if you stepped back, not out of spite, but out of respect? Could you trust that life has its own way of teaching? That people grow not just from love, but from consequence? Because sometimes the path to wisdom is paved in failure, and the strongest form of love is letting them walk it. Release unrealistic expectations. There's a quiet form of suffering that hides beneath most of our frustration. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it lingers. It shows up in small disappointments, in unspoken tension, in subtle withdrawal. And if you trace it to its source, you'll almost always find one thing: expectations that never matched reality. We expect people to behave the way we would, to care the way we care, to notice what we notice. And when they don't, we take it personally. But here's the truth. Most people avoid expectations or premeditated resentments. They're assumptions dressed up as fairness. They make us believe we're asking for something simple, something obvious, something anyone with a good heart would naturally do. But those assumptions are built on our wiring, not theirs. And when we impose them on others, we set ourselves up for disappointment and them up for judgment. The Stoics warned against this trap. They taught that the wise man doesn't get angry when people act like people. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Not because he was cynical, but because he understood the value of preparation, of seeing reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. Unrealistic expectations are the enemy of peace. They place your emotional state in the hands of someone else's behavior. You feel loved only if they text you back on time. You feel respected only if they say the words you hoped they would say. You feel seen only if they respond exactly how you imagined they should. And when they don't, you spiral. You take offense. You create stories in your mind. They don't care. They're selfish. They should know better. But the truth is, they're just being them. You're the one assigning extra meaning. Releasing unrealistic expectations doesn't mean you stop having standards. It means you stop projecting your standards onto people who never agreed to them. It means you allow people to reveal what they are capable of without turning that into a commentary on your worth. This shift is powerful. It allows you to receive others as they are, not as projects, not as tests, not as characters in your story, but as people flawed, inconsistent, complicated, and often unaware. And from that place of acceptance, you can make clear decisions not based on disappointment but based on alignment. Is this behavior something I'm willing to live with? Is this person operating in a way that supports my peace? If yes, great. If not, you walk. Not because you're angry, because you're clear. Most of the time, people are not trying to hurt us. They're just being themselves, acting from their own fears, their own patterns, their own priorities. When we expect them to read our minds, to share our values, or to meet us at levels they've never even visited, we create suffering for both of us. And then we call it betrayal. But it's not betrayal. It's a mismatch. Letting go of unrealistic expectations also frees you from control. You stop walking into every interaction with a script. You stop measuring love by how closely someone matches your invisible checklist. You start appreciating what people do bring instead of focusing only on what they lack. You stop trying to shape people and start seeing them. This is not always comfortable. It requires humility. You'll have to admit that some of your pain came not from what they did, but from what you expected. You'll have to confront the part of you that still believes if I love enough, they'll change, or if I'm clear enough, they'll meet me where I am. But people don't change to match our love. They change when and if they're ready, and your peace can't depend on that timeline. So take inventory. Where are you holding on to silent expectations? Where are you feeling frustrated not because someone crossed a line, but because they never lived up to a line you never voiced? Where are you making someone wrong for being exactly who they've always been? And most importantly, what would it feel like to stop expecting and to start observing? To stop demanding and to start deciding? Because peace doesn't come when others meet your expectations. It comes when you release the ones that no longer serve you and finally meet yourself where you are. Not everything needs a reaction. In a world where everyone has something to say, silence becomes power. We're conditioned to respond immediately, instinctively, emotionally. A comment, a look, a delay in reply, a passive-aggressive gesture, and we're already reacting. Already in our heads, already formulating comebacks or explanations or defenses. But here's a quiet truth that changes everything. Not everything deserves your energy. There's a difference between being aware and being reactive. Awareness allows you to see what's happening. Reactivity forces you to become part of it. And the more you react, the more control you surrender, not to the person, but to the situation, to the noise, to the emotion. And over time, Your peace gets eaten alive, not by the big things but by the constant compulsion to respond. Stoicism teaches us to pause to create space between the event and the emotion. Epictetus said we have two handles, one by which we can carry things and one by which we cannot. That's the decision point. That's where you choose your handle. Do I react from emotion or respond from clarity? Do I engage because I need to win, or do I release because I value peace more than pride? Not everything needs a reaction. Someone talks behind your back. It means you've outgrown the need to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. It means you've seen what happens when you fight every battle and you've chosen another way. But this takes discipline because your emotions will still rise. Your ego will still want the last word. Your pride will still flare up. And in those moments, you must return to yourself. Ask, does this serve me? Will this matter in a week, a year? Is this fight mine to hold or just a storm I'm standing too close to? When you stop reacting, you gain time to think, time to breathe, time to choose a response instead of defaulting to one. And in that space, something magical happens. You begin to see things more clearly. You notice patterns. You understand people. You spot manipulation before it lands. And sometimes the answer isn't a clever reply. It's distance. It's silence. It's walking away without explanation because explanation is no longer necessary. This doesn't mean you let everything slide. It doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. But it means you respond with strategy, not impulse, with power, not noise, with purpose, not provocation. That's the difference between someone who reacts and someone who leads themselves. So take inventory. What are you reacting to out of habit, not out of value? What drama are you still feeding with your attention? What people or situations are costing you peace that you never agreed to give away? And what would happen if just for today you let a few things pass? Not because you're afraid, but because you finally realize not everything is worthy of you. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's elevation, and not every battle deserves your sword. Choose your battles wisely. There's a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't roar. It doesn't fight every insult, every challenge, every misunderstanding. It simply chooses. Chooses what to engage with. Chooses where to invest energy. Chooses when to speak and, more importantly, when to walk away. Because wisdom isn't just knowing how to win. It's knowing which wars are worth the wounds. In the let them mindset, this is the fine line that must be drawn. Letting go does not mean you tolerate everything. Peace is not passivity, and boundaries are not optional. Some battles must be fought. Some lines must be drawn. Some silence must be broken. But not everything deserves your fire. And if you burn for every offense, you'll have nothing left when it really counts. There's a saying, never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. It's crude but true. Some people are not looking for resolution. They're looking for reaction. They feed on conflict, on chaos, on the attention they get when they pull you out of your character. And the moment you respond emotionally, they win. Not because they're right, but because they've redirected your energy away from your purpose and into their drama. The Stoics knew this trap well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. That's power, choosing not to form an opinion. Not because you're uninformed, but because you refuse to let your mind be hijacked by things that don't matter. Because you understand. Every opinion is a form of investment. Every word is a seed. Every reaction is a doorway you either open or walk past. But this doesn't mean you allow disrespect to walk all over you. Quite the opposite. Choosing your battles means you do fight, but only when it serves something greater than your pride. You confront not to punish but to protect. You speak not to dominate but to clarify. You draw the line, not because you're angry, but because you've defined your values, and anything that crosses them must be met with resistance. Too many people confuse peace with avoidance. They stay silent when they should speak. They let behavior slide that erodes their self-respect. They let it go out of fear, not out of wisdom. But if you let everything slide, you're not peaceful. You're passive, and eventually that passivity turns to resentment. Quiet, corrosive, internal, until one day you explode. Not because of one incident, but because of the 1,000 things you never addressed. So yes, choose your battles, but choose them with intention, with discernment, with clarity. Not every comment deserves a reply, but some must be met with truth. Not every offense requires confrontation, but some require distance. Not every silence should be broken, but some must be filled with the sound of your boundary. And this is where the let them theory reaches maturity. You let people be who they are, but you also choose who you allow into your world. You don't demand that others change, but you change how close they're allowed to stand. You don't fight to convince. You walk in your truth and let your standards do the talking. Choosing your battles also means protecting your energy. Ask yourself, what am I really fighting for here? Is it justice or validation? Is it truth or control? Is it necessary or just familiar? Sometimes we fight because conflict feels like home, because we grew up in environments where being on edge was normal. But survival patterns are not life strategies. You don't need to swing every time someone throws shade. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who doubts it. Sometimes the real power is restraint. So take inventory. What battles are draining you? What arguments are you repeating? What situations are stealing your time without giving you growth in return? And what would your life feel like if you stopped being dragged into every emotional skirmish and started standing in a deeper kind of strength? Because a wise man is not the one who avoids conflict, but the one who no longer lets chaos choose the battlefield. Shift the focus back to you. At some point, you have to ask yourself a hard question. How much of your life have you spent watching other people live theirs? How much time have you wasted overanalyzing their words, their silences, their moods, their mistakes? How many nights have you replayed conversations that weren't even worth having while your own needs went unmet, your goals sat untouched, and your peace eroded quietly in the background? We become so obsessed with others that we forget ourselves. We track who disappointed us, who ignored us, who didn't show up the way we hoped. And in the process, we stop showing up for ourselves. We abandon our routines, our boundaries, our rest, our creativity, because we're too busy mentally managing everyone else. But the let them mindset asks you to redirect that energy, to stop checking on everyone else's emotional temperature and start checking in with your own. Not in a self-centered way, but in a self-aligned way, because peace doesn't come from fixing others. It comes from focusing on what you can control. Your mind, your body, your habits, your environment. Stoicism teaches this beautifully. Epictetus said, "Man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems." And what are those imagined anxieties, if not a constant obsession with how other people think, act, or respond? We live in stories more than reality. What did they mean by that? Are they mad at me? What if they never forgive me? These loops don't heal anything. They distract you from the one person you can actually change. You shifting the focus back to yourself doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop overing at your own expense. It means you bring the mirror back home. You ask, what do I need right now? What am I avoiding? Where am I outsourcing my worth? Because the truth is, the more time you spend dissecting other people's behavior, the less time you spend building a life you're proud of. It's a slow death by distraction. Every moment you spend wondering why they haven't changed is a moment you're not changing yourself. Every emotional loop you spiral through is a drain on your clarity. And the hardest part? No one's going to save you from it. No one's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you've been neglecting your growth while watching them live." That moment has to come from within, and when it does, everything shifts. You stop waiting. You stop analyzing. You stop needing closure from people who never gave you clarity. You stop looking outward for peace and start creating it inward through discipline, through routine, through presence. You start making your bed, showing up for your workout, keeping your word to yourself. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because you're done losing yourself in people who never earned that access. You start to realize how much you've been leaking your power through arguments that don't matter, through relationships that don't grow, through thoughts that don't end, and you finally say, "No more. This is your life, your energy, your time." And the moment you stop focusing on what everyone else is doing, you remember what you were meant to do. So shift the focus back, not just once, but every time the pattern starts to repeat. Every time your mind drifts back into analysis mode. Every time you catch yourself trying to fix, help, or rescue someone who never asked. Ask instead, what is this distraction costing me? What have I abandoned in myself while trying to be everything for everyone else? Because the truth is, when you focus on yourself, not selfishly but intentionally, you begin to rise. You begin to rebuild your strength, your clarity, your presence, and eventually you realize the people who were worth your energy never needed to be chased to begin with. Let people feel their emotions. It's one of the most human things we do. We rush in to comfort, to explain, to fix. Someone is upset and we immediately say, "Don't cry." Someone is angry and we tell them, "Calm down." Someone is quiet and we ask, "What's wrong?" As if silence is something to solve. We do this not because we're cruel, but because we're uncomfortable with emotion, with pain, with anything that can't be neatly labeled or quickly resolved. But there's another way, one far more powerful, far more human. Let them feel. Let them cry. Let them sit in silence. Let them be disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed, heartbroken. Let them feel the full weight of their experience without trying to interrupt or redirect it. Not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that feeling is not something to be feared, it's something to be respected. We don't need more people who know how to fix things. We need more people who know how to hold space, to sit beside someone in the storm without trying to stop the rain, to say with presence, not platitudes, I'm here. I'm not here to change how you feel. I'm here to witness it with you. The Stoics understood the value of inner experience. They didn't reject emotion. They simply refused to be ruled by it. They knew that pain was a signal, not a sentence, that sadness was part of the human journey, not a flaw in the system. Marcus Aurelius didn't preach suppression. He preached observation. And that's what holding space really is. Witnessing without control. Being present without trying to manage the moment. Letting people feel their emotions also means resisting the urge to interpret everything. We think they're angry, so it must be about me, or they're distant, so I must have done something wrong. But their emotions are theirs. You don't need to fix them to be loved. You don't need to absorb them to be kind. You don't need to understand them fully to offer presence. Sometimes the greatest kindness is to not make it about you, to let them have their experience without inserting yourself into it. This also means giving up the illusion that we know what's best for others. We might think if they just looked at it differently, they'd feel better. Or if they stopped thinking that way, they'd be fine. But healing doesn't happen on your schedule. Clarity doesn't arrive through force. Growth isn't delivered by advice. It's earned through experience. When you let someone feel without judgment or solution, you're giving them the room to learn what only they can discover. And this is especially important in close relationships. It's easy to become the fixer, the one who always knows what to say, the one who smooths every bump. But when you do that, you unintentionally teach the people around you that their feelings are too much, that their sadness is inconvenient, that their anger needs to be corrected. And over time, they begin to silence themselves, not because they've healed, but because they've learned you can't handle their fullness. Letting people feel is also how trust is built. Real trust isn't you make me feel better. It's you don't run from my pain. It's knowing that someone can sit beside you in your lowest hour without trying to change the channel. It's knowing that your sadness doesn't scare them, that your struggle doesn't make them pull away. That's safety. That's love. That's maturity. And you deserve the same. You deserve to be around people who don't just cheer your highs, but who don't flinch at your lows. People who don't minimize your pain or rush you to heal. People who know how to listen without fixing, who know how to breathe with you when the weight gets heavy. And if you want to find those people, become one of them first. So ask yourself, where are you still trying to manage the emotional experience of others? Where are you rushing people through their feelings because you're uncomfortable, not because they need saving? And what would happen if instead of reacting, you just remained present? Because sometimes the deepest form of compassion isn't to change what someone feels. It's to sit with them long enough that they remember they're not alone. Let them as a daily practice. It's easy to understand this concept once you hear it and it makes sense. Let them. Let people think what they want. Let them go if they must. Let them misunderstand, project, ignore, or fall away. In the moment it feels powerful, like a breath of fresh air after carrying too much. But then the moment passes and life happens again. Someone disrespects you. Someone ghosts you. Someone disappoints you in the exact same way you thought you'd already healed from. And that's when you realize this isn't a philosophy you understand once. It's a practice you return to daily. Everyday life gives you 1,000 invitations to overreact, to micromanage, to control, to explain, to prove. And every day you have to decide again and again to let them. Not once, not perfectly, but consistently. Because let them is not just a theory. It's a discipline, a re-entering, a conscious return to your own side of the street. It requires humility because there will be days when you forget, when your old patterns scream louder than your new awareness, when your ego wants the last word, when silence feels like weakness and distance feels like rejection. On those days, you won't feel wise. You'll feel triggered, small, emotional, and that's exactly when the practice matters most. The Stoics never said detachment was effortless. They never claimed that wisdom comes naturally. What they taught was repetition, reflection, the constant refining of your response. Marcus Aurelius journaled every morning, not because he had mastered the art of letting go, but because he hadn't. Because, like us, he was human. Because, like us, he needed reminders. And so do you. Every conversation is a choice. Engage or observe. Every opinion is a test. Defend or detach. Every emotional wave that hits your chest is an opportunity. Write it or let it pass. And the longer you practice, the more you realize the peace you're building doesn't come from things getting easier. It comes from you getting clearer, Stronger, softer where it matters, and unshakable where it counts. Let them is also a healing mantra. It teaches you to stop begging for closure. Stop chasing understanding from people who aren't capable of giving it. Stop correcting stories that were never based in truth to begin with. Instead, you learn to say, let them think what they think. Let them feel how they feel. Let them go where they need to go. And I will remain here steady in myself. But none of this happens in theory. It happens in the moments you want to send that message, but delete it instead. In the moments you want to correct the lie, but choose silence. In the moments you want to fight for your side, but walk away with your dignity intact. That's the practice. That's where the muscle is built quietly, privately. Not for the world to see, but for your soul to feel. And you'll slip. You'll speak when you should have stayed quiet. You'll overthink. You'll overreach. That's okay. The practice isn't perfection. It's return. Return to center. Return to peace. Return to your breath, to your values, to the question that anchors it all. Does this deserve me? Because that's what this mindset protects you. Not from pain, not from loss, but from self-abandonment. It keeps you rooted in who you are. Even as the world pulls at you from every direction, and over time it becomes more than a practice. It becomes your posture, your presence, your power. So the next time you feel that familiar tug, the urge to explain, to fight, to fix, pause, breathe, whisper it to yourself if you must let them. Let them go. Let them think. Let them stay small if they need to. Let them walk their own road while you walk yours with grace. Because every time you choose peace over reaction, you strengthen the quiet voice within that says, I'm not here to control, I'm here to grow. And that's a choice you make, not once, but every single day. There's a quiet kind of transformation that happens when you stop fighting for control and start choosing peace. Not the kind of peace that comes when everything around you is perfect, but the kind that grows inside you when you finally release what was never yours to hold. That's what this mindset is about. Not becoming distant, cold, or detached from life, but becoming closer to yourself than you've ever been. You stop forcing. You stop fixing. You stop begging for understanding from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And you begin to trust deeply, patiently, that what's meant for you will not need to be chased, explained, or defended. You stop reacting to every shift in someone else's energy, and you start honoring your own. Let them. Two simple words, but within them is a life of freedom. A life where you no longer tie your emotions to other people's choices. A life where your energy is no longer scattered across a battlefield you didn't choose. A life where your power is rooted. Not in control, but in clarity. Let them pull away. Let them talk. Let them stay the same. Let them walk out. Let them show you who they are and believe them the first time. You don't have to change anyone. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to rescue what's trying to fall apart. Your job is to stay centered, grounded, and honest with yourself. This is the practice every day in small moments, in silence, in the pauses between thought and action. Choosing peace over pride, presence over panic, growth over noise. Because when you master the art of letting them, you finally begin the process of becoming you. Stay stoic, stay blessed.